Hello and welcome to Military Mantra. In this interview, we have today Harry Moffitt, former Australian SAS team commander who has served in Australian Defence Force. He is also an author of the book 11 Bats and a psychologist. And in this interview, we'll try to understand his journey in the Australian Defence Forces and various life lessons that he has learned from the battlefield and also from his love cricket. So welcome Harry Moffitt on this interview and thank you for doing this.
Thank you, Akash. It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you.
So Harry, if you could tell us, how was your childhood before you joined the armed forces, and what was your motivation back then to join the Australian Defence Force?
Yeah, well, I guess I grew up in the Defence Force, and there's a long lineage of my forefathers who served in the Defence Force, right back to the Royal Marines in the 1700s in England. And my grandfather, my father served, and I grew up in Navy neighbourhoods. My father was in the Navy, so we moved around a lot every few years. So I grew up in the Navy environment and the Defence Force environment. So I guess I didn't really have much of a choice, Akash. It was always that it looked like it was always going to be the Defence Force, and I guess I was very keen on joining the Defence Force, but it wasn't until I was 12 years old and I was inspired by the Iranian embassy siege in London, and that was in 1980, and that kind of sparked a fire in me that's still kind of burning today, I think, and that is to serve one's country. I can't think of a more honourable thing to do, And I was born and raised in Melbourne, and Melbourne's a very defence proud city. So again, just surrounded by these influences. My mother also was a woman of service. She was a nurse all her life. So I guess that theme flows not only through our lifestyle or where we live, but also through the family, the close family as well. So it's been in me from the start, Akash, I think.
Got it. I just have one more question. So how does Australia as a community look at military service? So do more people are inclined towards it? Because I understand your story because you have a lineage. So how does the general citizen look at it?
Well, I think to answer the first part of the question, I guess the Australian people are very proud. I think most countries are very proud of their Defence Force. In Australia, we have Anzac Day and Remembrance Day are the two most significant days, and we have hundreds of thousands, millions of people turn out on those days to remember both the service of Australia, but also on Remembrance Day, the service internationally. And like India, we've served, our nation served alongside Indian soldiers and Defence Force people all across the ages. Australia is a very young country compared to India, but we've served together in many wars. So I imagine it's not dissimilar to the pride that I know India has for their defence members too.
Makes sense. So Harry, if you could also picture it for us, how was your journey into the armed forces? Like, did you start as an operator in SAS, or did you eventually opt for it?
No, so I guess after I was inspired by the British SAS as a youngster, I was determined to at least attempt SAS, because it's a big undertaking, of course. Any country's special forces are highly demanding. But no, I joined the army in 1986, and I was posted first to the Signals Corps with communications. And it wasn't my first choice. My first choice was infantry, but you didn't get a choice in those days. Wherever the numbers were needed. But it turned out to be an excellent thing, because whilst I was in the Signals Corps, I learned Morse code, I learned about communications, and of course, for special reconnaissance and special forces, communications is critical, and we often a long time by ourselves behind enemy lines. So having those skills was great. I trained all that time, and I was only a small, skinny guy, so I had to beef up and get strong pretty quick. So I trained for about 3 or 4 years, and then in 1990, I put my name down for SAS selection, and I went across to Perth, and out of 150 starters, I was one of about 20, I think 25 that passed. So it was a great honour and a great privilege, and I feel like it was a good reward for the hard work that I've done too. I felt like I had really earned my spot by the time I got there.
Got it. So if you could also speak about the selection process for the Australian SAS, and also now that you're served for around 30 years, what do you think are the qualities that they're looking for?
Yeah, so the training in the course is tough, and necessarily so. It's physically demanding, psychologically and mentally demanding. It's spiritually and socially demanding too. You really have to have your broader life squared away, because it is suspended for a period. One of the objectives of any special forces training program is to break you down physically and mentally and fatigue you, and then give you complex tasks and complex activities to complete, and see how you react under pressure. And I think the fastest way we can put humans under pressure is by depriving them of sleep, upending their routine, depriving them of food, not starvation, but so that kind of pressure really does give us a clear indication of how people think under pressure, and then are they emotionally stable, and are they also able to make sound, ethical decisions. And I think that's really important. And also, to be able to fight under that type of fatigue and stress is critical. Once you pass the selection course, and that's going on in the moment, actually, here in Australia, the 2022 selection course is going on as we speak. That small cohort then goes on to 18 months of courses, sometimes longer, up to 2 years, and that includes, of course, weapon handling, explosives, urban warfare, but it also includes, very advanced first aid, basic surgery, high-level communications, including, computer, a bit of computer science, languages, parachuting, diving, etc. I'm sure that your viewers would be well versed in the skills that are required. So by the time we put a young operator into the pipeline, it could be up to 2 years by the time they come out and they're ready to serve. So it's a massive investment. And it also, knowing that period and those challenges, the people coming in, the men and women coming into that pipeline really have to be prepared. And that's why I say, even socially, you really have to have home, bills, family, all of those things squared away for that period, because you're pretty much dedicated to one thing.
Yeah, makes sense. So Harry, if you could also tell us, when you were a young Special Forces operator, so how was your first combat experience, and, the various learnings that you had from that?
Yeah, it's a great question, and I reflect on it often. And to be honest, I was scared, and there was you have a fear in you, and that's natural. That's a natural human physiological and psychological response. Yes. However, the training that we receive allows you to get that under control pretty quickly, and then start to pick your way through how your body's reacting. It's interesting. I always say that. You notice it when you're doing a magazine change on your weapon. You might have a slight shake in your hand. There might be a quiver in your voice. There might be a shaking of my knee would shake a little bit at times. However, there's some really good practices of which you're probably aware. Making sure you're breathing. It sounds kind of quite simplistic to say this, but when we do go into stress or fear, our breathing can become shallower and more frequent, and that's just, again, a defensive mechanism. So just reminding yourself to breathe is really, really important, and taking deep breaths. I had a friend who wrote breathe on his glove. He had the word breathe on his glove, so that when he was shooting or in a contact, that just to remind him. But look, the training, Akash, is excellent, and the most important thing in any combat experience is to try and seize back the initiative. That's the first thing to be secure. Seize back the initiative, and the best way to do that is to just gain as much information and have excellent communication between the team members. And another great lesson I've learned is elite teams are brilliant at the boring stuff. They're brilliant at the really basic stuff, and that they automate communications and gun drills and situational awareness and decision making, because those things are what hold you in the best stead in the face of a credible foe. So I'd say those two things at a personal level. I think amongst many things I've learnt over the time, getting a hold of your fear and training yourself with those tools that can help you pick through those initial moments. And then as a team, practicing at the basics, being, as I say, brilliant at the boring stuff.
Got it. So Harry, you told me that you had around 11 deployments. So if you could speak about few of them which you still remember and which you still cherish, what would they be?
Yeah, I think all of them were profound learning experiences. I served in East Timor in a more humanitarian and diplomatic role. So we worked closely with the Ramos Horta, Ginana Guzmao, and Alfredo Renato, the kind of key players, the key governmental players. We worked very closely with those people. In a lot of ways, there was no combat experience in those deployments. However, I found it one of the most demanding, because you've got tens of thousands of internally displaced people, a terrified, highly anxious populace, and we're a small team. We're the only assets or force elements on the ground in Timor at that stage. So the agility in leadership and performance beyond combat, really a great test. And it's probably an area that most special operations forces around the world, the US, UK, the Five Eyes, India would be no different, the European special operations, realizing that our operators need to be elite combat operators, but they also need to be elite at doing other softer skills, because they the war now is fought in cities around civilians. It's no longer on a front. So Timor was really fond memories of Timor as a test of many aspects of my leadership and military thinking and decision making. As far as, I suppose, if I was to pick a highlight or a professional highlight, to put it that way, it would be I was a free faller, a parachute specialist, leading night free fall raids in the mountains of Afghanistan. And in one particular case, we led I was the commander and leader of a troop-size free fall parachute insertion into the mountains in Afghanistan, and we walked through the hills to get to the target, and we managed to capture the individual and some others without firing a shot. And really, that's the untold story of a lot of special operations: is we work in the dark, stealthily, and sometimes firing a shot means that you've been compromised. So that's a great deal of the work that we did. And there's been, I suppose, the lowlights as well. It's a traumatic experience. You're exposed to the depravity of humanity. You see your mates hurt. That's probably the hardest thing, is seeing your mates hurt and suffering. And of course, inevitably and eventually, colleagues and other combatants are killed. So I guess, there's a multitude of experiences there. And one thing I would say to anyone who's listening, aspiring soldiers of any description, whether they're special forces or not, frontline soldiers, is start to build a routine of having debriefs, whether it be with a psychologist like I am now, or whether it be with counsellors or even good mentor friends. Establish a mental skill, and it is a mental skill, of debriefing and talking about things, because I think that's helped me greatly. And I see a lot of other friends around who don't talk about it, and they tend to suffer. So I hope that kind of catches. If you'd like any more info, I'm happy to share more, Kash.
Yeah, sure. I just want you to also highlight, your love for the cricket, and how did, that connect with your life in the combat, in the battlefield?
Look, cricket's played a huge role. I wrote a book about it, as you know. So, and the book's called 11 Bats, and we were just talking about that off air. It's called 11 Bats. Everyone who knows cricket, there's 11 batsmen in it, or 11 cricketers in a side, notwithstanding the 12th man, of course. The book covers basically the 11 years and 11 deployments of those years. Look, I grew up with cricket. I played it in the streets. Probably my favourite memories of playing street and backyard cricket. I played in a couple of cricket clubs, particularly later in my career. I played with the Applecross Cricket Club. I still play today with veterans, and we also play a national backyard cricket. But particularly over the deployments, I took a cricket bat with me and ball and tennis balls on every deployment, and they were a chance for us to unwind. I remember one day we'd been treating some civilians who had been victims of a suicide bombing, and it was a very heavy day. There was dying and dead civilians, including children, and it was very heavy. And we're generally a bit older than the average soldiers in the special forces and special operations. And most of us had children. So I remember that afternoon we were quite depressed and down and very low after the day we'd been spent treating dozens of people. And someone grabbed the bat and the ball and said, "I'm going for a hit." And two of us were playing, and then a couple of other people wandered out. And I just watched as everybody's body language changed from being down and low to being, kind of recovering in a way. And there was an appeal and a LBW and a bit of a, what it's like, a bit of sledging, and it became this tonic, this therapy. Cricket was this therapy that helped soldiers unwind after traumatic events. And as a psychologist, I'm absolutely fascinated by the power of cricket. I think that cricket universally is such an inclusive sport. It doesn't matter where you're from, what language you speak, what skill level you are. Everyone gets a bat, everyone gets a bowl, everyone gets to drop a catch at cow, whatever. So I think it just has this wonderful therapeutic quality to it. And over 11 years, I collected this curious collection of 11 bats. Now I would get the men and women and soldiers that I served with to sign the bat, as you do. And I've collected these bats, and they've been on display in the Australian War Memorial here and other military shrines around the country. So I'm really proud of them. I love the collection of bats, and needless to say, I love cricket.
That's nice. So Harry, I had one more question. So did you had a chance of operating with the other special forces from the other countries? Also, specifically, have you ever operated or, cross-trained with the Indian special forces as well?
Yes, I have with Indian on humanitarian aid and UN missions. Also, when I served in Baghdad, I had 2 tours to Baghdad, one during just after the invasion, and one back a year later serving in Baghdad. And we served with a number of Indian liaison officers, and I think they were working quite closely with the FBI and our AFP, which is they played a massive role in those countries. But in terms of other the units that we hold exchanges with, both for SEAL both US units, Delta and SEALs. We also have exchanges with the UK SAS and SBS. We have a strong relationship with the New Zealand SAS and also with CANSOF. So that Five Eyes, I guess, is the key elements that we work with. And I've served and fought alongside most of those guys. I'm actually heading over to the US shortly to meet up, and UK as well, to meet up with some old colleagues and visit a couple of their headquarters or their bases. But yeah, look, I think, Australia, if there's one thing I can say, well, one of Australia's great capabilities is our special operations, the SAS unit. Whenever the US or UK, or even I expect in the future, India, now that we've signed these high-level agreements at the political levels, we'll be working very closely with our special operations regionally and into the Pacific. And I think that now I'm still involved in training with the unit back in Perth, and also here in Melbourne. So I look forward to hopefully being a part of that in training teams. I'm a little bit old now for running around like an operator, but I'm grateful to be in a position where I can offer my advice back to the young operators, which is fantastic.
Yes. So Harry, I have one more question, because you have served around 30 years in the Australian Defence Forces. So what does leadership actually mean to you? And how the various combat experience that you had help you become a better leader?
Yeah, it took me till about deep into my career to kind of come to terms with what my leadership style is. And I think that's a really important thing for individuals to first establish who they are. So I kind of think in self, others, and environment. They're the three kind of things. So look, ask yourself, what kind of style and what kind of leader do I want to be? And I think a great question to ask is, what legacy do I want to have? And your legacy as a leader should be about how you make people feel and how you leave them better than you found them. So that's the first thing. Good leaders are asked for feedback regularly too. They'll sit down with their team and say, tell me something tell me the things I'm doing well, and tell me the things that I could do better to help us as a team. And I think that's sometimes courageous to do that.
Yes.
But I think that's been something I've really valued, and that's asking the team. Military leadership, I think, can be broken into three easy parts. That's management, leadership, pure leadership, and then command. So management's just, you've got a lot of material, equipment, bullets and biscuits and bombs and everything that you've got to manage, and often a lot of money as well in leadership positions. So you need to be good at the basics, Excel spreadsheets, computer time. You need to be good at the management, that linear stuff. Leadership, the next thing is leadership, and that's, for me, is more about people skills, those soft skills, being able to add value to people, coach people and bring them along, and be a good person, ask plenty of questions and get to know people and grow people. So invest in your team's professional development. Your job as a leader is to raise other leaders. That's one of the key jobs of a leader, is to grow the next level, because in the military, you're only a bullet away from someone having to step up and take your position at any time. And that's a big responsibility, to make sure that the people around you are ready to take that. And then the final part of leadership, I think, or final aspect that's important, is the command aspect. So command, there are times in the military, and particularly in combat, where you just tell people to do, and they've got to do it. If you've planned and communicated the plan well with your team, and they understand what's going on and they're bought into the plan, then there should be no surprises. And sometimes you need to tell someone to run across the street where a machine gun might be firing down that street, and they need to go now. And you say, you need to go now, get across there. And that's a massive responsibility, to put people in harm's way, to follow you out the back of a plane at night, to follow you into thousands of people who are looting and robbing a city. But that at times it comes, no more questions, no more soft talk, no more material. just do as we're told and get on and get the mission completed. So that's the way I reflect, Akash, on what makes up leadership is understand your style, plenty of feedback, and be open to it. Take notice, don't take offense. Yeah. And I also like, you need to be good at management. So that's the boring basic stuff, looking after the back office. You need to be good with people. If you're not good, you can practice it. There's lots of soft skills training. And then you need to also know when it's time that enough is enough, do as you're told, and make command decisions out in the battlefield, because that's ultimately you're there to achieve your mission.
Yes, makes sense. So Harry, I have one more question. So
yes.
You have been into, multiple combat experiences. If I can ask you, any 3 life lessons that you have learned from your tenure, what would they be? Any 3?
Life lessons. Yes. Well, not directly. Well, I suppose it's related to combat. The biggest thing I learned was my cricket club became a place where I could come home from the traumas of I experienced extreme events, to say the least of it. So I've often referred to my cricket club as my third thing. Your first thing's your family, your second thing's your job, and your third thing is you. What do you do to relax and get it? And you were saying earlier, you play a lot of football, and that team environment away from the military really helped me, and particularly in my transition out of the military, that's really helped me, that network. My family, don't ignore your family, keep them always, informed of what's going on. Again, my family have just been so important to me. There's so much stress in military service alone. And then when in special forces in particular, often you leave and go to places you can't tell even your family. But I used to have good connection with my wife and kids, and so they understood. And I think at the end of your service, you've got another life to go on with. So that's important, that if you can maintain your family during that. A lot of families break up, unfortunately, Akash, and so I'm eternally grateful for that. The other thing is that, and I say this a lot now, and I've started my own education foundation for the SAS here in Australia. You've got to prepare for life after service. And that starts almost from the moment you join. It's particularly in frontline corps and frontline troops. It can be over in a matter of seconds. It could be whether it's a broken leg or a gunshot wound or worse. And so, I try to help young soldiers and young operators with working their way through what is their plan B. And I think it's a life lesson for all of us, because particularly these days, you may have more than one or two careers. So being able to build in resilience into your life and your career portfolio, if you like, I think that's really important. So I started studying about halfway through my career, realizing that one day they'd either kick me out or I'd be injured. And I think that's been something that's been really powerful. But I guess family, having something outside of work, and making sure you're professionally developing yourself in a broad sense so that you're ready for your life after that. But I guess it'd be remiss of me not to say, Akash, that you need to look after your body and your mind, and you're through good nutrition, prioritizing your sleep. If you're having trouble sleeping, come and see a psychologist. I know a good one. But the nutrition and regular exercise remain strong. We know that things like bone density and muscle density are highly related to longevity and health and well-being. So I think that's really important. And I'd finish that by saying that make sure you're debriefing regularly. I know I already mentioned that, but we know how powerful that is, and a lot of special forces units do that habitually now. So if it's good enough for them, I guess it's good enough for all of us.
That makes sense. So Harry, if you could also tell us, you became a psychologist. So how did that interest grow? Were you already a psychologist before getting into the forces?
No, it's something I was interested in, Akash, from probably pretty early in my career. I studied a bit about human performance, physical, psychological, and I read a lot of philosophy as well. And a lot of philosophers are ex-soldiers. If you go back and look across the ages. So I guess it always fascinated me. I started studying in around early, around 2008 or so, and with the intent, I thought that if I want to go into a job afterwards, and I suppose bring my military career to bear, noting, there's the mental grit that one needs to kind of get through all of this. I thought that would be a nice marriage, and I think it has been for me. I work with veterans now. I continue to study. I'd like to do more in the philosophy space, because I think that's an emerging area where understanding ourselves and understanding how we view the world is very important, particularly for soldiers, because it can be challenging at times to equate your values against others, and that's a really important skill to have. So, but yeah, I'm really enjoying. I've only been a psychologist now. I left the Defence Force in 2019, and I've only been a psychologist for 3 or 4 years now. So I'm just finishing my apprenticeship in my mid-50s. But it's been bloody fantastic. I've really enjoyed it, and it's been the vehicle on which I've transformed, or been able to transform myself from an operator and combat operator into my post life, which has been great. Again, education is an easy throwaway, but it's such a powerful multiplier.
That's true. So Harry, you told me, you also went into the airborne training. So how was the first experience when you jumped out of an aircraft? How did that feel for you?
Yeah, I can barely remember it. Just information or cognitive overload. So again, the military are excellent. All militaries around the world are excellent at training and preparing for things like parachuting, very complex. But it was exciting. I remember, being on the back of the ramp. My very first jump was a static line jump. And I remember being excited, and I was in there with my cohort of SAS operators for that selection course. So we're all close friends, and we kept each other up. There were a few guys in there that didn't enjoy it and as much. But look, I think one of the characteristics of special forces soldiers is a sense of daring, maybe a little more disposed to risk taking. So things like that generally don't impact too much in terms of fear. And as I said, we learn from pretty early on some good cognitive skills that we can apply when we're under pressure or afraid. But I think I really enjoyed the free falling. By the time I'd got to free fall parachuting and jumping from 30,000 feet and using oxygen and jumping at night with equipment, I was pretty comfortable. The training was superb, and I loved free fall parachuting. I couldn't wait to get out the plane, and I felt quite competent and confident. So I only ever had one malfunction over hundreds and hundreds of jumps. So I must have done something right along the way. But it's an excellent skill, and it's often underrated. You can insert small teams from 30,000 feet from 30 kilometers away onto small islands in the middle of the ocean with very low signature. Or you can jump into the ocean, meet up with a ship or a submarine, and then go the rest of the way. So it's an excellent way. It always has been parachuting to get operators from World War I or World War II through to now. It's probably is a little underutilized these days, I'd say, but I think we'll see a lot more of it as we together with India and Australia and the Quad and other countries back into the region. I think we'll see a lot more of it.
Got it. So Harry, if you could also speak about, how does the team culture in the SAS look like, and how is it different from the regular infantry?
It's excellent. My experience is I miss it. I really do miss it. The bonding, through all of the extreme experiences and the hard training, particularly the hard training. There's this concept of suffering as a privilege. Some medical teams talk about, surgeons might talk about it. So when you suffer together, whether that be in training or whether it be in combat, it's got this binding effect, as you can imagine. We spend a lot of time together, so we need to get past the personal stuff because not everybody's made for each other. So I've found a very high level of professionalism. Even people that wouldn't get on away from work were able to still maintain a professional relationship with each other. And there's always a sense that the person beside you is not only competent to have your back, but they actually have your back. You rely on them intrinsically, to say the least. So we have that trust. And even, as I said, even though it's been challenged at times, it's being challenged currently, there's still a deep respect and a deep professionalism, and the unit culture. I've just been there recently, Akash, and the new generations that are coming through really haven't changed, and they've got their heads and eyes firmly on the future. And to be around those groups and feel the power and the love and the care that they have for each other is, I've never witnessed it anywhere else. Maybe some sports teams get close to that, but I don't. I think this is kind of on another level, if I can be so bold as to say that. But the important thing, I guess, is that the message there is that you need to have that level of trust and care about each other if you're going to go away and face those traumatic and extreme experiences.
Got it. So Harry, since you are a psychologist and been an operator as well, if I can ask you, the most difficult situation you have been, and what was your mindset back then so that you were able to overcome that?
Yeah, there's two that come immediately to mind. I think that day where the civilians were killed and injured in the suicide bombing incident, I was triaging the people we couldn't save, and they a young boy literally died in my arms. Many people did that day. So that comes back, and that young boy, I would be driving home, and I'd be back in the world, because when you're away, you kind of suspend the trauma. You have this kind of defensive mechanism, because the next day you've got to go on another mission, and then you experience trauma again. You come back, you sleep, and then you go out on another mission and experience. So you've got to suspend it all. But I remember coming home one day, I was just driving the car, and that young boy just pops back into my mind. And this happens to us all at some level. Having a shower, boom, there he'd be, doing some push-ups at the local park, walking the dog, he'd visit. And I went to the psychologist and I said, he's starting to annoy me, it keeps popping up. So we did some what's called reframing in practices, and that's just being able to look at his presence, if you like, in my mind, in my reality, as a more positive thing. And over a number of weeks and practices with the psychologist, I was actually able to reframe. And now when that boy, he still visits me, if you like, I think of it positively, and that he was. I think he would be grateful that I was there to care for him in his last moments. So. So that takes a bit of work to do from a psychological perspective. But probably, I lost a colleague. I was driving a car. I drove a car through an ambush in 2008, and my close friend Sean McCarthy, who was sitting beside me, was killed. We drove over an improvised explosive device, and that was very tough. He was killed. I was driving the car. I had survivor guilt. I felt like I was responsible for it. I had to, and then there was another gentleman in the car who lost his legs as well. So I had this great survivor and guilt and shame. I was sent home wounded in action from that incident. And that I found myself probably at my lowest ebb. It was certainly the most significant challenge, both physically, because I lost about 10 kilos. The doctors were going to remove my leg at one stage from a severe infection. And I didn't know how to dig my way out of it. And the way it came about, Akash, was I kind of started thinking to myself, how am I going to get back physically? I've lost all this weight. I want to get back to the job. I'm starting to recover physically. What am I going to do? Well, of course, what am I going to do? I'm going to go to the gym. I'm going to get back into some strong nutrition habits. I'm going to do my physiotherapy from my wounds, etc. And it struck me that there was this physical program I could go through to come back physically. And that's obvious, isn't it? Yes. But what there wasn't was a psychological program for me to go back, a psychological gym, if you like, a gym of the mind or a gym of the brain. So again, with the psychologist, I sat down and we talked about what does that look like. And there's a range of cognitive skills that I now teach to corporates and teach to militaries, a suite of about 20 different cognitive skills that if you take them off the shelf and build your own little mental gym, I believe you can recover from anything, absolutely anything. And it took me, a good 4 to 6 months to really recover from that and to build this mental. I used to have practices every day, from mindfulness to goal setting to visualization skills. And over time, I feel like I'm a better human today after that period, just from doing those skills. And now those skills I apply just like I do in the gym every day, or most days I go to the gym. I apply those same mental skills to my life now, and I feel freer and more in control. We all deal with a bit of anxiety, every human being on the planet, but most of it's anxiety we shouldn't be too worried about. Now, anxiety is actually a natural thing. It gets a bit of a bad rap, but these cognitive skills, we all have them. It's just about being deliberate in practicing those things. So from the young boy visiting me regularly, and he still does occasionally, for example, here today, and the death of my very close mate and traumatic event, I think that both of those incidents, if I can take positives out of them at all, is it's taught me more about psychology and about myself, and that is to be deliberate like you are in the gym with your mental health or mental fitness, your mental well-being.
Got it. So Harry, my final question to you would be, I've seen a lot of photos of yours with the weapon. So what was your favorite weapon when you went into combat?
Everyone will be expecting me to say, some new version of a Colt or M4, but M14 or something like that. But I think my favorite weapon was a Browning 45, a pistol. I did a bit of, I did some out of uniform work here and there around the place, and always, having good pistol drills. I always found pistol drills were probably the most challenging to keep up, because you didn't have, these new weapons now. You can shoot anything anywhere with them, with all the optics and the laser designators, etc. But an old-fashioned cold steel pistol was my favorite. Some of the young guys used to say to me, "What are you carrying around that old bloody thing for?" And I'd still outshoot them on the range with it. But a little bit of nostalgia, Akash. I think the weapons now are so advanced that if you can't shoot the black dot out at 25 meters these days, then you're probably struggling from the start. So all through my career, I carried an M4, probably short barrel where I could, where it was effective. I spent a lot of my time in the book over that period. I spent a lot of my service as a team leader and a team commander. So it was behoving on me in that managerial role I mentioned before, to make sure that we had the right weapons, and that was with the guys who knew how to use them. My favourite weapon, I often say that the guns, the bullets, the optics, all the sexy stuff that everyone sees on television, they're tools. They're not weapons. The real weapon is up here. And I think the brain is the greatest weapon that you have. And for all special ops guys who are talking about going on to do special forces in your audience in India, or going on even into frontline combat roles or any roles in the Defence Force for that matter, don't get wrapped around the axle about your weapons, because this is the weapon that really matters. What you decide and when you decide how to use a weapon is the most important thing. And so get those cognitive skills cracking and train your mind. And if you're sharp in the mind, it doesn't matter what weapon you've got in your hand, you'll use it in the appropriate way, and you'll defeat your enemies.
Yeah, makes sense. So thanks a lot, Harry, for your time on this session and sharing your experience in the armed forces and various life lessons that you've learned. I hope a lot of my audience will get to know about you, your various experiences, about the book that you have written, and would be interested to know more about you through this medium. So thanks a lot again for taking out the time for this session, Harry.
No worries at all, Akash. And I'd be happy to send over some books to you for you to give away to your audience if you like, because India played such a large role over my life and from cricket perspective. So I'd like to think a few people enjoy the book there with its military flavour as well. But thank you very much. It's been an absolute pleasure, mate. Cheers.
Sure. Thank you, Harry.